Today on CityBilly Adventures, we're finally starting the miter saw station that I've been dreaming about for years. So we're back in the shop for another big project. If you've watched the channel before, you might be wondering if we're ever going to do part 2 of the outfeed table that we started 2 years ago. Yeah, someday. We're doing our best to prioritize the projects around here to make the best use of our time. Are we doing it right? Probably not. Having a large outfeed table to support the table saw and give myself an elevated work surface was pretty important, but the drawers will have to keep waiting. But now that we've finished up some big projects inside the house, I've got some free time to focus back in the shop, and the next priority is building a dedicated miter saw station along this back wall. Up to this point, my miter saw setup has either been on my knees, on sawhorses, or this portable stand. But no more! The goal is to build a dedicated miter saw station with dust collection, extended support in both directions, and tons of storage underneath. I'm also going to build a spot for my pocket hole machine. I started woodworking with this 12-inch DeWalt miter saw, and it's served me well over the last 15 years. But now that I'm building my dream shop, I'm upgrading to a slightly more versatile saw that will be the centerpiece of the operation. I'm fairly loyal to the Ridgid brand, mainly due to their lifetime warranty. I originally planned to buy this compact design that was a blatant ripoff of the Delta Cruiser, but it got discontinued before I was ready to buy one. So after considering prices and features, I ultimately settled on this Ridgid 12-inch sliding miter saw. And as you can see, one of the things I had to consider was the massive footprint of this thing. The guide rails take up a lot of extra space behind the saw, and the 70-inch miter capacity makes for a very wide path on either side of the saw too. But we're lucky to have the space that we do, and there's plenty of room to accommodate this big saw. So the plan is to have the miter saw station take up almost this entire wall, and after subtracting the space for the dust collector, we had about 17 feet left to work with. I wanted to make sure I could support at least an 8-foot board in either direction, so the miter saw will get placed pretty much in the middle of the open space.
A while back, I acquired a truckload of scrap plywood from a local factory. They get their raw materials in boxes built out of these 4x4 sheets of 3/4-inch plywood. The holes make the boards almost useless, but they're perfect for cabinet carcasses and shop drawers, so I took as much as they'd give me. I ended up using this stuff in Mrs. CityBilly's closet, the outfeed table, and now the miter saw station, and it saved me a ton of money on materials. I started by building the cabinet that will support the saw itself. I measured the overall footprint of the miter saw front to back and side to side. This cabinet ended up being 34¼ inches deep and 39 inches wide. I wanted my overall work surface to be 38 inches tall, so once I subtracted the height of the saw and accounted for an 1.5 inch countertop, the cabinet itself ended up being 32 inches tall. Since these cabinets will eventually be covered by a countertop and be full of drawers, I was able to assemble them with just strips of plywood for the top, bottom, and back. This allowed me to stretch this free plywood even further. To account for inconsistencies in the shop floor, I used these PowerTech leveling feet at the bottom of all the cabinets. I had to cut around the concrete block foundation and the dust collection pipes at the back of the cabinet. Then I built the countertop out of 2 sheets of 3/4-inch MDF. I laminated the sheets together with wood glue and construction screws, and used a flush trim bit to make the edges perfectly, well, flush. Having the 1250 CFM dust collector is nice, but as you can see, it doesn't get everything. Some tools are better than others, but the router made a pretty big mess. I trimmed the front of the counter with a strip of 1x2 maple. Maple is a hard wood and will hold up a little better when I inevitably bang something into the counter. Dust collection on miter saws is notoriously terrible, so I decided to copy the box method that a lot of other YouTube woodworkers have done in the past. I installed 4-inch dust ports in the back corners of the countertop, and later I'll build a box that basically surrounds the saw and keeps the dust enclosed and directed towards these ports. I used contact cement to laminate a sheet of black Formica to the top of the counter. Once the glued surfaces touch each other, they're pretty much stuck in place. Putting a couple strips of wood under the Formica lets you get it lined up before you permanently attach it. It also helps to leave the Formica a little oversized. After running over the entire surface with a J-roller, I cleaned up all the edges with a flush trim bit. And I always finish the front edge with a small 45-degree chamfer to give the counter a tiny bit of detail. Then I swapped to a straight bit to router out a shallow border around the dust ports so I could attach chicken wire over the holes. This will keep large debris from going in the dust ports. Now that the hard part was over, I started building the remaining cabinets. The plan is to have the countertop level with the miter saw in both directions. This section will house my pocket hole machine, but first I need to have a small stretch of countertop next to the miter saw for the dust hood to rest on. I built the lower shell 18.5 inches wide so I could have one large drawer at the bottom. Then, instead of building two small countertops, I built one big one and cut it to fit next to the saw and under the pocket hole machine. The section for the pocket hole machine is going to be 18.5 inches wide, so that left 11.5 inches for a skinny bank of drawers with a counter on top. I took careful measurements to make sure the counter lined up perfectly with the top of the miter saw. Wait a minute. The whole point of this counter is to be perfectly in line with the saw.
Oh, what a loser!
After some Tylenol and an extra hour in the shop, my second attempt was the perfect height. Then I built one more cabinet carcass for the pocket hole machine, and everything was lining up nicely now. I used some reducers and 2.5-inch flex hose to attach the pocket hole machine to the dust collector. This run of pipe goes to the two ports behind the miter saw, or to the pocket hole machine. I separated the two with a 4-inch Y fitting and some blast gates. Then I started building two large cabinet carcasses for the left side of the miter saw station. These are both 37 inches wide for some bigger drawers. And I made sure to triple check my measurements this time so the counter would line up perfectly with the saw and not the counter. No, you didn't. Fuck. Thankfully, I was making these mistakes with free plywood, but there's still no excuse for overlooking these measurements twice. I think I was working on too many projects at once around here. I'll reuse those junk carcasses for drawers later. Since the left side of this cabinet will be the outside edge of the miter saw station, I wanted a more finished look. I used a leftover piece of MDF from the counters for the far left outside piece of the cabinets, so there weren't any holes visible. Two sections of pipe from the dust collection system have to run through the counter, so I cut some holes using a 4 1/8 inch hole saw. This counter was really effing heavy. It would have been a good idea to have Mrs. CityBilly help me move it into place, but I decided I'd rather throw my back out. I sealed up the gaps with black window caulking. One of the features I'm most excited about for the miter saw station is integrated stop blocks. The plan is to have a tape measure built into the countertop so I can quickly add a stop block for repeatable cuts. I finally got a track saw for my birthday, and I used the track as a straight edge to router out a channel for T-track. The green painter's tape is there to draw the lines for the channel and to prevent chipping on the edge of the Formica. Cutting out this 3/4 inch channel really highlighted how disappointing the dust collection on this router is. Then I made a very shallow pass for the adhesive tape measure. It's actually designed to be laid inside the T-track, but I thought it looked better next to it instead. The T-track is made out of aluminum, so you can cut it with the miter saw without damaging the blade. To get an accurate measurement for the tape measure, I clamped down a scrap piece of wood and made a test cut. Then I measured from the cut side to the start of the counter and cut the tape measure at that measurement. And keep in mind that since this is the left side of the counter, we need a special right to left tape measure so the measurements get smaller as you get closer to the blade. Now that I had countertops on both sides of the saw, I could start building the dust hood. Miter saws are terrible at dust management, and incorporating efficient dust collection was one of the things I was most excited about with this project. In the years leading up to this build, I've seen a lot of woodworkers build similar designs in their miter saw stations, so I decided to do it too. I'm essentially building a box around the top, back, and sides of the saw to corral the dust and direct it down towards the 2 dust ports that I built into the countertop. The box has to be pretty big to account for the support arms swinging in either direction. I used more window caulking to try to make the box airtight. Once the hood was installed, I started working on a removable panel for the front. I used some cardboard as a template and slowly cut around the moving parts of the saw with a box cutter. Then I traced the opening onto a sheet of 1/2-inch plywood. My original plan was to use magnets to keep the front panel in place, but it was such a tight fit, I didn't end up needing them. The front panel will prevent dust from bouncing back into my face when I'm making 90-degree cuts, and I can remove it if I need to make angled cuts. I continued the right side of the miter saw station with 2 more cabinet carcasses. These are both 23 inches wide. I cut an angle on the front corner to work around the window in the shop. Clever editing helps disguise the fact that this trim router might not have been powerful enough to cut the channels for T-Track in this MDF. I know I have a more powerful, corded router around here somewhere. Finally having some organization for all my tools is another big reason this miter saw station was on the priority list. I probably should have made several shallow passes, taking off just a little bit of material at a time so I didn't overload the router. Or use a fresh, sharp router bit. No, we'll just edit it to look like I know what I'm doing. And finally, I built a couple boxes to use up this remaining opening. I have some overhead racks for leftover lumber and trim, but these cuppies will hold shorter pieces that I'm saving for God knows what.
Alright, for the sake of your attention span, we're going to stop here for now. We've built a huge work surface to measure and cut material and contain the dust. Coming up in part 2, we'll finish up by adding face frames and drawers. Then maybe I can finish that outfeed table. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.